Hey guys, welcome back to the PHAROS Fit podcast. Great to be back with you guys again. I am here today with Tony Blauer. If you don't know who Tony is the founder of Blauer Tactical Systems, which he founded in 1985, which has grown to be one of the world's leading consultant companies, specializing in the research and development of performance psychology, personal safety, and close quarter tactics, and scenario-based training for law enforcement, military, and professional defense instructors. As that kind of suggests, he's one of the best at this stuff, guys. So this is going to be a great podcast. I want you guys to really listen to this. You're going to get a lot out of it. I'm going to let you know everything that Tony does and how you can learn from him. Tony, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm so excited that you're on our podcast. I know you're a busy guy, and it's so good to have you here. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I've been actually like a fan of yours and the PHAROS movement, everything since you guys started. So I've been lurking on the side, and I'm glad we finally connected.
Me too, brother. Thank you so much. So why don't we just start? Like, let's let the listeners know like everything about you and everything about Tony. What's your background? How did you get into this? And you know, let's start from there.
Yeah, well, at 60 years of age, if we start from the beginning, we may run out of hard drive space. And time. But, you know, the short answer is I grew up in Canada, and I was always very athletic and played multiple sports, but I was always very afraid of competing, not actually getting in the game, but afraid to let down my teammates, afraid to perform. And it was a real weird dichotomy because I was really good. I mean, I would play, I would do well, but I always carried this weight of fear and stress of how's this going to turn out, you know, always worrying about the future. And so, you know, I wrestled, I competed in wrestling, gymnastics. I was a very serious skier. If you grew up in Canada, you're either a skier or a skater. Right. And I was a skier. And, you know, where my whole fascination with self-defense and martial arts kicked off was I was about 12 years old. I was leaving our elementary school, and up the street, they had just built a new high school the year earlier. It had just opened up, and I was going to be going to school there next year. And I'm leaving this baseball game. I'm all alone, and I'm kind of like skipping through the parking lot, and these two kids are on the sidewalk, and they turn in when they see me and they go, "Hey, kid." I go, "Yeah." And I stop, and I'm all like, you know, we just finished playing baseball. I'm excited. I'm going to walk home. And they go, "You go to school here?" And I go, "Yeah." And they go, "When do you go to high school?" They point, they gesture. I go, "Next year." They go, "Oh, you're going to high school next year, this one?" They go, "Yeah." They go, "Well," and they look at each other. And in that moment, I go like, something's wrong. And they grab me and spin me, put me in like a full Nelson, like the, you know, arms pinned behind my back. Right. And I'm like, ah. And the kid in front goes, "Welcome to high school." And he does like that Sugar Ray Leonard bolo punch. Oh, God. And he just sucker punches me in the gut. Well, everything went into super slow motion as this happened. And this is an interesting thing, like the physiology of stress can activate what's called tachypsyche. And this is from survival learning research, where your brain starts to process things so quickly that things appear like they're going in slow motion. Right. And you probably experienced that at some point. Everyone has. It's usually like a car accident or something dramatic, you know, where you're not really sure how this is going to turn out, and things suddenly slow down. Well, it's your brain is just processing things so quickly, so that it's trying to identify exactly what the threat is. Anyways, this goes into slow motion. And as I anticipate impact, Peter, I scream. And I make this joke often. I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but I tell this joke, like I scream better than my sister would have screamed, right? I had two sisters, and I would tease them and they'd scream and all this stuff. But I screamed like, I was like, "Ah!" And it scared me, but it scared them. And I felt it. It was fascinating. I hope you guys dig the story because it's very funny. I felt as I was screaming in that moment, remember, I'm like 12 years old, 12 turning 13. No study of martial arts or self-defense, but I felt when I screamed that the guy's grip changed. I felt like I had scared him by my fear. And as the punch hit, and you know this from your training and boxing, stuff like that, if you're going to take a body shot, you're not going to go like this and go, okay, hit me. You're going to, okay. If you're doing body tempering, you're going to go, okay, go ahead, hit me. Like you tighten up, you lock up. Well, I was as tight as I could be. I mean, the guy's pulling on my arms. I'm trying to get away. You could have hit me with a baseball bat then. I didn't know that. He hits me, boom. I don't feel a thing, but my psychological system was anticipating so much impact that I screamed. And I felt the guy loosen up, and I immediately knew intuitively, I need to scream again, even though I'm not hurt. So I yelled again. I pretended like my ribs were broken and I couldn't breathe. I went, ah, ah, and the guy let go of me, and I could see them look at each other, and they took off. And I'm on the ground on all fours going, ah, ah. And when they turned the corner in the tree line and they were gone, I kind of like sat up, fixed my shirt, went, what a bunch of fucking assholes. What the hell was that? And I went home. And this is the whole point of the story, but why I'm explaining it in such detail to your listeners is because the Be Your Own Bodyguard system that I developed decades later drew on some of these lessons that I discovered then through intuition. Nobody teaches this stuff. Feigning pain, feigning fear, and using that in a Trojan horse metaphor to manipulate the behavior of your threat. Whether it's an attempted rape, whether it's a robbery, you can mitigate the violence by manipulating the behavior if you understand the psychology of the bad guy. But we can get into that later.
Yeah, fascinating.
I get home and my dad says, so, how's the game? I said, it was good. He goes, what else? Anything exciting happened today? Yeah, I got beaten up by 2 guys. And he looks at me, he goes, what was it, a pillow fight? Like because I have no marks on me, right? So he says, what is a pillow fight? And I said, no, Dad, seriously, I got beaten up. These 2 guys jumped me. And he said, it was like 1972, turning 73. He said, well, you got to learn some martial arts. And that was the first time I'd heard the term martial arts like that. But I grew up, I was a Bruce Lee junkie, Robert Conrad junkie. But, when you're 6 or 7 years old, watching the original Wild Wild West, watching the original Green Hornet, yep. You don't know what you're watching, but I was transfixed by this artistic violence, like, Bruce Lee kicking somebody in the head as the Green Hornet, and Robert Conrad slipping somebody and throwing a hook punch and dropping the bad guy. I was fascinated by that stuff. 73, Bruce Lee passes away. And of course there's the martial art revolution. Right. And so I immediately signed up. There was only one school near us, a Taekwondo school. So my first actual official martial art was Taekwondo. Fell in love, worked out 7 days a week. Got into a confrontation when I was 15 with a kid in school, and he had shoved me up against the wall. And I kept hearing in my head as I was trying to figure out the range, because I was jammed up against the wall. I heard this voice: he's too close to kick. He's too close to kick. And I didn't know any striking, because Taekwondo is not a striking art. And we got in a fight. I ended up, it was messy, and it was shitty. I dominated, but it was fearful and accidental. And afterwards, I immediately signed up for boxing lessons, thinking, well, if I'd known something about firing a punch, I could have done something. I ended up throwing the world's shittiest jab that hit the guy, and then he immediately came back with an overhand right. And we get into this crazy movement, but it's curious. And again, I point out, I'm trying to quickly take my journey to when I started teaching and how this behaviorally based self-defense system evolved. Is like everybody else, I was looking for like tools in my toolbox to solve problems. If only I'd known how to box, if only I'd known how to grapple, if only I'd known jujitsu. And that's the danger. I didn't know this. Years later, 1980, I started teaching professionally. And
what were you teaching at that point, Tony?
Well, I was working for my father, sweeping the back of his import-export facility and working as a shipper. But I was a martial art fanatic. So I'm always working out. I'm always walking around hitting. hitting stuff. We get these big boxes come in, and I would actually beat the crap out of these boxes once I unpacked them, like Rocky would hit, sides of beef, right? Like Stallone. And they were so huge, Peter. They were like massive, like literally you could stand in them. They were like 1 3/4 corrugated cardboard. So you could really, boom, dig a shot in there. And if you hit it really good, a knuckle would pop in and you get that dopamine hit from the auditory crack. So I used that as my bags. I didn't have bags, right? And one day, one of my dad's best friends and also client, this guy Joey, says, hey, Mitch, his 15-year-old son, is having a bully issue. Would you teach him some stuff? And I said, yeah, sure. And so I start teaching Mitchell. And what am I teaching him? I'm teaching him some wrestling, some kicking from Taekwondo, and some boxing. Those are the 3 arts that I had actually been training in. It
was like
regularly.
UFC, basically.
I think there were a lot of guys around the world blending stuff. Kaja Kempo is a blend of things. And of course, Jeet Kune Do blends stuff, Bruce Lee's art.
Yeah.
So, that was mixed martial art in that sense of blending. And so 3 months later, which is an ironic time for anybody who knows how long a typical fighter will prep for a fight is 3 months.
Yeah.
3 months later, Mitch gets into the fight with this kid at school. Now, this is kind of the actual origin story for my philosophical shift from learning martial arts for self-defense and reverse engineering scenarios for self-defense. That's an important distinction. I'm teaching Mitch this stuff. Up until now, the bullying had been verbal abuse. Now, back in 1980, the world was a different place. It was suck it up, go tell the teacher, don't be a pussy. Why don't you just punch him? Years later, we discovered how much like emotional abuse can really impact people,
right?
From PTSD to suicide to it's gotten to serious things. And there's probably some I think society's gotten a lot softer. So that sort of stuff impacts us in it, but that's probably a different podcast and a different discussion. But back then it was, you got a bully problem, I'm going to hire a guy who I know who is a martial artist to teach you to defend yourself. That was the dad's fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
School wasn't doing anything. I was always a very ethically inclined person. My integrity has never been for sale. And I would tell Mitchell, because he's 15, he's full of testosterone. He's going, you go, hey, Coach Blauer, when can I hit this guy? I go, Mitchell, maybe never. He's an asshole. You're not going to sucker punch this guy. That's not what we do. Right now, he hasn't touched you. You just ignore him and avoid him. And the school's not doing anything. But one day, if he touches you, that's when you legally can defend yourself.
Yeah. Don't
let someone grab your neck. Don't let somebody shove you. Right. And I said, if he hasn't touched you yet, so right now you're just going to avoid. And, like a month later, he'd go, this guy's really getting on my nerves, coach. Like, when can I? And I remember saying to him, Peter, I said, Mitch, do you know to move your head properly or block or strike or slip? He's like, not really. I said, do you know how to strike really fast and hard? He goes, no, I'm just learning. I said, well, until you learn how to strike and defend yourself, I suggest you don't get into a physical fight. It was like very, very matter of fact, you have no talent or skill right now. I would avoid this as long as possible. So almost to the day, 3 months later, Mitch is late for class. Remember, he's 15, he's running through school. And this kid sees him. He's sitting at the back against some locker banks. And I used to give this kid Mitchell private lessons at his house. So I come in for the private lesson. Here's how I find out about it. He's sitting there like this. I go, what's up? What's going on? And he erupts. He goes, motherfucker, I go, hey, calm down, man. What's going on? What happened? He tells me he's late for class. He's running for class. And this kid trips him, right? And he goes flying in front of a bunch of people. His books go flying. He goes flying. He's embarrassed. And he gets up and he's kind of erupts. He's like, you fucking asshole. Like he's swearing at the guy. And Mitch had never asserted himself up until that point. He just kind of like, I'm not seeing this. And the guy go, what did you say? And he steps up and he walks, he encroaches Mitchell. And Mitch looks at him, he goes, He goes, "You've been bugging me since school started. I don't even know like who you are. Like what the hell? Like leave me alone." And the guy goes, "What are you going to do?" And he pokes him, that bully shot that pokes him, right? And Mitchell just loses at that point, and he grabs the guy, and he's describing, he said, and he shoved me, he says, and then I lost it. I grabbed him and I slammed him against the locker bank, and I screamed, I said, "Don't ever touch me." And Mitchell stops the story there, Peter, and I goes, I go, and he goes, puts his head down, he goes, "He dropped me with a left hook." I'm like, "Dude, what do you mean he dropped you with a left hook? Like, why didn't you check it? Why didn't you parry it? Why didn't you slip it? Why didn't you do any of the stuff we did?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Well," and you could see him like reliving it. He goes, "I was holding him with my left hand on his shirt." And he goes, "I had all my books in my hand." And in that moment, imagine if you had to box somebody and I said, "Grab his shirt and hold your gym bag." How soon until you get punched in the face? Well, the answer is right away. You immediately get punched in the face because you've tied up both your blocking and striking tools. So, but in the moment, here's what happened. And this is the coolest thing as far as like ignition for an idea. And I've explained this story many times. It was like the God of self-defense struck me with a lightning bolt. And I said, "Oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong."
Right.
And when I said we, I was benevolently including everybody in the world. I was like an aficionado. I studied everything. I had a book collection of all martial arts. Almost every single self-defense and martial art book and study starts from the fight is already on, meaning it's active self-defense. If you know you're boxing somebody Friday night, right? And you go, "Yeah, let's fight Friday night, 7:00 at the gym." And Thursday, he walks up to you at the gas station while you're pumping gas and goes, "You ready for tomorrow?" And you go, "Yeah." And he goes, wham, and he slam. He's going to hit you because you're not ready for the fight now. You're ready for the fight in 24 hours. When we learn any type of martial art, we say things, and I know this. If the guy has a knife, do this. If the guy has you in a headlock, do this. If the guy goes to tackle you, do this. So think about this. To practice all of those moves, I have to practice all of the counters. I need to let the attack happen.
Yeah.
The way neuroscience really works is this: your brain is part hard drive, and it's memorizing everything that it thinks is important. But there's a part of your brain that's always trying to predict the future. There's a part of your brain always trying to guess what the weather's going to be. Is dinner going to be good? Is this going to be a good meal? Am I going to get laid tonight? Am I getting fired tomorrow? The brain is always trying to predict the future. And it's an interesting way to look at it, if you understand it deeply in terms of like self-awareness. In the self-defense world, this is important because there's another part of your brain, and you probably know this, and if you don't, I'll just give you a light overview. The neuroscience of learning a skill set requires repetition. You decide this is a practical skill. It could be a deadlift. It could be a jab. It could be a snatch. It could be a running technique. When you decide this is important, I'm going to do it, you myelinate, you create myelination, which is this sheath that connects to neurons, and that becomes your neural program. What a lot of people misinterpret, or there's no such thing as muscle memory in the truest sense, but what they call muscle memory, it's a neural pattern, what you've learned. So get this. When I practice how to kick, how to block, how to strike, I'm creating neural patterns. But those neural patterns are triggered when I see a movement pattern that tells my brain, you know what to do here. So think about this. We do things like, what would you do if a guy gets you in a headlock and your brain downloads what it's learned? If it hasn't learned anything, somebody on this call goes, "I don't know what to do." Well, they would freeze because their brain has nothing to download. Somebody who's downloaded something, or somebody who's trained something, will download stuff. So you remember the 10,000 hour metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Macklemore made it really famous. Gladwell made it really famous.
Yeah. 10,000 to be an expert. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was based on a study by a researcher named Erickson in Europe. And without getting into what the 10,000 hour metaphor became, basically, if you do anything, basically they said, if you do something for the magic number seemed to be 10,000 hours, you attained mastery of that. Guitar, boxing, whatever it was. They studied Gretzky, they studied the Beatles, blah, blah, blah. So what I tell people, I go, look, if you do anything 10,000 times, you're going to get good at it. The problem is, and this is one of our maxims from our system, be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. And some people, Peter, think like I'm insulting them or their approach to something. What I'm actually, and I've always been talking about is, no, it's neuroscience. That you're myelinating the neuron to move a certain way. And if what you did is less desirable, then what you've done is you compounded the problem you're in. The bigger thing is this: if you do 10,000 reps of how to get out of a headlock or how to do a gun disarm or what to do if somebody mounts you, in order to practice that move, you have to do, and this is the kicker, 10,001 reps of letting somebody do that move. So you're always, when you're practicing the ethical counter, you're always practicing more reps than the actual counter, right? Because you got to start with, okay, throw the punch. I'm going to slip. So without getting too deep in the weeds, and I think I've already screwed that up.
No, you're doing great.
Is this, and I love this part of the neuroscience. If I create a pattern, so if I ask a Taekwondo guy, what would you do if somebody was in your personal space threatening you? The Taekwondo guy is never going to say, I'm going to double leg him and take him to the ground, because his programming is kicking predominantly.
Yeah.
If I say to the boxer, what do you do, guys, in your space? The boxer will never say, I'm going to step back and kick him.
Right. Because
he has an unconscious bias through the myelinization of the neuron, the practice, the motor pattern of going, hey man, and throwing the body shot or the uppercut or whatever. And if I say to the MMA guy who has practiced double leg, take him down, ground and pound, choke him out, he's not going to say, well, I'm going to step to 2 o'clock, get to the guy's outside, secure his arm. He's not going to do something that he hasn't practiced. He's not going to visualize that. So I guess, and I could talk about this shit for way longer than the podcast, but because it fascinates me, the brain part fascinates me. And that's how we hack learning, is we understand how the brain works. So we program people, we show them natural movements that are part of a natural program in their body and a motor recruitment pattern that they already have. For example, if you put your seatbelt on 10,000 times, that's the same range of motion as an elbow. If you do, look, your members in PHAROS, how many push-ups, somebody who's been training with you for a year, how many push-ups have they done in a year? Both in warming up and in warm-up.
They've done at least 100 a week for a year.
Right. So what is that? Right. 6,000 push-ups.
A lot.
So for those of you listening to this who've never done any self-defense, the kinetic chain of a push-up is the same as a palm strike. It's almost the same as a strike. The safest way to hit somebody in self-defense is with your palm, not with your fist. You like boxing, I like boxing, but fists and wrists are the most broken part of any fighter's anatomy. So boxers regularly sprain and break, fracture hands, sprain wrists, and they're using a wrap and then tape and a glove, and they're still hurting their hand.
Right.
So you tie this into my system, which is weaponizing the startle flinch. When you get scared, your hands open up and you push away danger. You're already loaded the push-up position, the platform's there. The missing link in the training, and this is what we do in our training, is we connect fear and aggression.
Right.
And that's the indignation of how do I hit somebody hard? Because a lot of people wrestle with that, is like, I've never hit anyone. How do I do that?
Yeah, I was kind of curious, like prior to when you started working, how much emphasis was there on how to deal with anxiety and emotion as opposed to just the technical side of self-defense? Because,
Yeah.
you know, like when a boxer first steps in the ring, whether it's sparring for the first time or whatever, the thing that kills them is just the anxiety, and that strips all their energy, and then just everything falls apart. Whereas when they're calm, when they can deal, when they're prepared, you know, you can deal with the situation a lot better. So did that exist prior to when you started working, or not really?
It existed. Certain coaches would talk about it, but it was almost always like a fortune cookie at a Chinese restaurant. Customato, who was a great boxing coach, but got really famous because he trained the young Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
And D'Amato would say things like, the difference between the hero and the coward is what they do with their fear. Both feel it. So you go like, that's up in the gym. But what does that mean? Like, I could read that and go,
right.
Okay, what do I do with that? Like, it was a fortune cookie. It was like a Zen cone. It was like, what do I do with that? Remember I said earlier on, I didn't struggle with the fear as a young athlete. I carried the weight of fear, and that's a distinction.
Right.
Because I showed up to the games. If I was competing in the wrestling match, I was still there trying to win, but I was carrying the weight, the stress, right? So you have an athlete who's so stressed out before a competition tomorrow. You see him in the morning, you go, hey man, did you get some sleep? He goes, no, I was tossing and turning all night. He's got to try to hit that flow state, but he's also sleep deprived.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So if we can figure out the anxiety part, right, the anticipation of danger or fear and what it's doing to us, then, you know, what we do is we're better prepared on game day. And on game day, whether you're competing in some functional fitness workout, or you're got to defend yourself, or you're making a presentation at work, or you're deciding, oh, should I get married? How am I going to ask this man or woman to marry? Whatever it is, all of that, we start a movie in our mind and we start hallucinating. How's this going to go? And you know, in our No Fear program, we explain that the fear spike creates doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. Hesitation creates procrastination. Yeah. So those three things happen almost automatically. You can't have a moment of doubt without stopping what you're doing. If I say to you, Peter, I need you to write a check for this, and it's this investment. And you go, can I afford that? Should I invest in this? That's a moment of doubt. And it might be like required thinking, but anytime doubt happens, everything stops. Mm. So if you've got a moment of doubt just before you're going to do a deadlift and it's a max lift PR, that might be the moment you also pull your back or your hamstring, because you hesitated, you stepped out of that flow of stepping in. Every athlete that I've ever worked with, I asked them, and we tell people, like in our Your Own Bodyguard class, one of our tenets, we tell people, like, our intuition is like an internal GPS that's warning you. Our intuition is almost never wrong. And we tell people, like, every victim of violence that I've ever interviewed said they had a bad feeling before the attack.
Yeah.
But they don't know what to do with it. It's like, I knew there was something wrong with that guy. I knew he was following me. I knew that guy was a creep, you know, or whatever. But the same thing, if I said to you, you know, and I'll use me, I know, you know, I've had for years on and off, like a left hamstring issue. I know before it's going to happen. I'm running and I go, oh man, I think my hamstring's going to go, but I don't stop running.
Right.
That was my intuition going, hey, idiot, stop running. You got to figure this out. Yeah. I know when I'm going to throw my back out. Right. And so I tell people, like, our intuition whispers in our ears, and then our ego or our pride or our lack of self-awareness goes, shut up, I got this.
Yeah.
So this is you know, you asked a really interesting, deep question about like mindset and stress management. Back in the 80s, certainly not in the 70s, but back in the 80s, that didn't really exist. And what happened was, I never finished, you know, the story about Mitch. I want to circle back to that for a second, if I can. Mm-hmm. When Mitch got sucker punched, and I had the joke I make, the God of War hit me with the lightning bolt, and I, again, benevolently 20 years old go, wow, we teach self-defense wrong. I had this insight that all self-defense not should be, must be taught from the perspective of what's the scenario? Who are you in the scenario?
Yeah.
What's going on? Right? And because in this scenario, the first place we're attacked is our emotional psychological system. But all self-defense and all martial arts starts from the physical. That's why I gave you that 10,000 hours metaphor. Yeah. You come into class, your instructor says, hey, be careful out there, situational awareness. Now check this out. Peter, get me in a rear strangle. You go behind. Okay, guys, get your chin down, grab. It starts like the attack's already happened. If you Google self-defense right now, the classical definitions online are the physical act of protecting your property or your life. Even the dictionary assumes the attack has already happened and now you got to counter it. My company's definition is completely different. We have an official definition. It is the decision to choose safety when danger is imminent. The decision to choose, and we thought about that. And what that does is that gives you permission to include two stages that seem to be missing from most self-defense protocols. And that is the detect and avoid and defuse and de-escalate.
Yes.
So in the 80s, we created what's called the 3Ds: detect, diffuse, defend. Detect and avoid, defuse and de-escalate, and if push comes to shove, how to defend yourself. So we've got three distinct blocks that are like Lego blocks. They connect together. So I make this joke, like real violence isn't like Star Trek where somebody can beam down, right? I'm not here like this. You know, I just finished a workout and I'm like going, I'm bending over. Am I going to throw up? And then all of a sudden a guy beams down and gets me in a headlock, and it's perfect because I'm already bent over throwing up in a bucket, right? How did the guy get me in a headlock? Where did he come from? So I always make this joke, real violence isn't like Star Trek. And all of my research, decades of research, every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling, which means your intuition saying something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Why aren't we starting self-defense there? Well, remember, your brain's a hard drive trying to anticipate the future. So if all I practiced, all I have is my mental blueprints of getting out of a headlock or a lapel grab, or a punch comes in, I slip it or I block it, then I don't have any data points on what to do when I get a bad feeling.
Yeah.
I don't have any data points when someone says, hey, you know, can I ask you a question? I don't know how to diffuse it and de-escalate it, right? So we have tons of content for that we built over it's now 43 years I've been teaching.
I almost think of it like when I'm riding my motorcycle, it's like you have to look way ahead of you into all the possible scenarios and situations that could go wrong. Is that car going to pull out? What's this person going to do? Is this person going to run out in the street? I almost think of it like that with self-defense. It's like, what are all the situations that could potentially happen, and how can I avoid them?
That's an amazing example. And it's one of the things that I tell people when I'm explaining to them, you know, how to diffuse your vision, right? And see stuff and anticipate. And I give them examples. Like if you ride a bike, if you ride a bicycle, if you ride a motorcycle, if you ride a car, you already understand situational awareness. But then you don't apply it when you're like walking down the street. I mean, most people don't, right? So I try to, with everything we're teaching, is I try to connect it like the elbow, right? If you're doing, like for people who work out with you, like if we ended up doing something at your place, I'm taking, if you can do a front rack, right? You can do a vertical elbow. Somebody's choking you and I go, well, you know, front rack him in the face, right? I'm connecting it to a neurological motor skill that you already know. Now what's hard is hitting somebody hard and having some meaningful aggression behind it because they're attacking you. So we've got a block, you know, that we talk about as far as, you know, manifesting aggression and courage and stuff like that. But it was interesting. In the 80s, when Mitch lost that fight, I immediately looked at him and I said, are those your books? And he goes, what? I go, are those your school books from today? He goes, yeah. I said, grab them and grab me. And now I use big fancy words like replicate and reverse engineer. But when I was 20, it was just do that. And we just worked through it again. And what was interesting at the time was when I grabbed him holding his books and I told him to throw the punch, I could feel my body locking up. We learned years later with the cross extensor chain from the neuroscience of startle flinch is that if you're holding your purse or your kid or your keys, or you're a police officer listening to this and you've got somebody's ID and a flashlight like this, and somebody throws a punch at you, you're not going to go wax on, wax off. When you start a flinch, if your body is touching anything, it'll clamp down on it. It'll lock down on that. And so, you know, when he grabbed the kid's shirt and was holding his books, when that guy started the left hook, even though his body maybe wanted to cover his head or push away danger, it couldn't because of physiology. So, you know, our system only integrates the physiology, the understanding elements of physics and the psychology of movement. So it's truly a scientific look at how can we protect ourselves. It has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with your occupation. It's just like, hey, here's how the body moves under duress. But I started doing, you asked me about fear and anxiety. In the 80s, I started doing scenarios all the time. When that incident happened, every single class after that, we would say, we would look at something. It could have been a movie. It could have been in the news. It could have been, you know, an eyewitness event. Hey, this happened to me. What would I do? I would never just say, well, here's how to get out of a headlock. It would include the walk-in, the encroachment, the verbal assault. And we started doing once a month. It was like Fight Club before there was Fight Club. We would get together and we would put on, you know, in 1993, it took me 5 years to do, but I created a suit called High Gear, which is a head to toe, you know, it's a 10-pound scenario training suit that we sell all over the world right now, military, law enforcement, MMA guys, but it's mostly for self-defense. But before then, before I had gear, we'd put on, like, again, I'm from Canada, hockey gauntlets, you know, cage, helmet, taekwondo chest guard, baseball shin guards, and we'd suit up and beat the shit out of each other. But we wouldn't do, and we'd videotape on VHS. You know, like most of your listeners are going to have to Google what is VHS, right? But the what's interesting is we would do these scenarios, but they were always things like, if you came in and you had signed up, I'd say, Peter, like, what would be your worst case scenario for a violent encounter? And you go, I don't know, maybe like two guys mugging me and I'm a little drunk. So I would go and, you know, there's 20 people there and we're sharing equipment and we're doing this. And I go, okay, Peter, you're up. And I've told two role players to come up and harass you. And I might've said to you, Peter, you're at a bar, you're leaving a bar, you're in a parking lot, you're slightly drunk. And you're going, oh, fuck, he's using that scenario that I'm really worried about. And then I might say to you, hey, spin around, okay, stop. And now you're like a little wobbly. Right. And these guys come in and go, hey, dude, give us your fucking wallet, man. And you're like, whoa, you're trying. I would make you do a verbal scenario for 30 seconds or a minute in advance of any movement. And what that taught you was the totality of a scenario, not just how do I get out of a headlock.
Yeah.
And it was during that this started to grow, and we would do them every month. I did that for 13 years straight. You know, that's my 10,000 hours of scenarios. Right. And this is the biggest thing that I learned. There were people that would show up, cauliflower ears, busted nose. They'd be sitting there like, because they heard, hey, we're doing these like scenarios. And then there'd be like, you know, women that would show up who were victims of sexual assault. Everyone was there. Some people were there for how am I going to do? And some people were there for cathartic purposes. If I said to you, we're sitting on the sidelines, you and I are both, you know, fit athletes. We're macho type A guys. We're entrepreneurs. And we're looking here and I go, let's bet on some people. That guy there with that scar there, broken nose, cauliflower ear. How's he going to do? Yeah, I think he's going to do good. That little girl there, that 120-pound girl, I think she's going to panic. She's going to freak. Well, I saw the counterintuitive reactions because we judge books by cover, even though people say don't. We look at that bigger guy, the strong guy that looks like he's got that experience. But the guy who's had 200 fights at a door because he's a doorman has maybe never been ambushed or has never been mugged. He's the guy starting the fight because he's watching some drunk asshole for an hour and then goes,
he was prepared for it. He was prepared.
Exactly. Exactly. And, but I've seen both audiences, and I gave you two stereotypical audiences. And what I discovered in the 80s, and remember my fascination with fear, is the people who managed their fear managed to fight. I'll say that again because it's a very important line for everybody to memorize. The people who managed their fear managed to fight. And now I'm going to change the tense and say it to everybody. Those who manage their fear manage to fight. Now, it doesn't guarantee victory, but I will tell you this. In a choiceless choice where the fight's going to happen, like what we're dealing with now with COVID, with pandemic, with force this, the people who fight, the people who manage their fear will manage to fight. And it doesn't mean that we win, but what it means is our dignity, our pride, our self-esteem, our confidence, our resiliency all continues like a muscle. It continues to be trained.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would see people who had tons of experience and lots of fight experience roll over and tap out in a scenario where I go, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And what it was they were overwhelmed by the fear, because on game day, you're not going to be a different athlete. Your skill set doesn't change on game day. Everything is controlled by your mindset.
Right. Fascinating. And from that kind of the stuff you were doing there, is that what became Spear or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for Spear, actually kind of, I kind of started to observe the startle flinch response doing a drill. It was around 1987. I was doing a drill that I aptly coined the sucker punch drill. And I would have my students just wearing boxing gloves. And one guy only had a mouth guard on. I did it the first time with a student who was a good boxer. And I was always trying to surgically analyze moments. I was very, very introspective with stuff. And I kind of listened to my intuition a lot. And I was doing this isolation exercise, trying to see how close is too close, right? Because you like boxing, if I walked up to you in the street, right, and I went, hey man, you got a problem with me? You would naturally blade and go, hey dude, that's close enough. But you would pause at the distance where you could fire your punch. If you're a kicker, you'd go, hey man, I don't want trouble. And you would naturally stop where you could get that kick up and do something. And if you're a grappler, you might pause and square off because you're getting ready to shoot under.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about. Like our motor patterns have been unconsciously biased by the way we practice. I'm going to throw something out here, and this might be a little too esoteric. That I don't mean that as an insult. You'll get this, but people who've never trained will go, what's he talking about? If you have an unconscious bias to do certain moves, that compromises your true situational awareness, because part of your brain is trying to look for the pre-contact cue to trigger the counter you like to do.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get that as you're going, oh, I'm going to draw his jab here, and then I'm going to come over the top, or I'll step outside and hit him to the body. But what you're doing is you're anticipating the future. Fakes and feints is anticipating the future, wondering, okay, I see he's getting tired here, he's mouth breathing here, and we start to read that stuff, right? So it's a very fascinating thing, but that gets a little nerdy and geeky. You got to really be into the coaching or strategizing size of that. But so the Spear really became something I started studying. And of course, it wasn't called Spear. And I just actually posted, ironically, this week, 2 really cool anecdotal stories of where did the acronym come from and where did the actual name come from. I didn't start off one day going, I'm going to come up with the Spear system, and 20 years later, it'll be a famous self-defense protocol. Like I was doing this isolation drill. I said to this kid, Warren, who's a really good boxer, I said, Warren, put on those 16-ounce gloves and start a conversation with me. And at any point during the conversation, just try and punch me in the face. And I said, I don't want you to be in a fighting stance. I want you just standing in front of me, you know, like this. Just stand there and move around. And I was videotaping it, and I was trying to figure out what is too close, how close is too close. Well, I wish I had taken a picture. We didn't have digital phones back in 1987, but my face at the end of this first hour, I had a mouse under both eyes, bleeding from the lips, fat lip, migraine. I was so stunned, Peter. I got the shit punched out of me. What I was, and this is a fascinating thing for anybody's like really listening to the science of this. Even though I was standing here like this, and Warren would say something like, "Hey, the boss wants his money," right? He would just like improvise something. So I wouldn't go, well, tell the boss that I don't have it yet. I need another week. I wouldn't hit a stance. I immediately, what I did is when he said that, I knew, okay, the scenario is he's the strong arm of a loan shark that I owe money to. And everyone listening to this, you got to understand this. In real life, you're not your black belt when you're leaving the ATM. In real life, you're not a jiu-jitsu guy when you're watching a movie and something erupts, right? You know, you get out of your car and you're late for a meeting and you close the car door and you're going, yeah, I'll be there late. And a guy suddenly jumps out of nowhere. You're not a Thai boxer right there. You're going, what the fuck? There's a moment where your emotional psychological system goes, holy shit, I call it the Jack in the Box moment. And you remember Jack in the Box, you remember that? You could stand in front of the Jack in the Box with your fingers like this. No, you know the clown's going to pop, but there's no way you will intercept it and finger jab the clown's eye before it pops out, because action's faster than reaction. The clown will, so even though you know it's going to happen, so you can say, well, I would do this and I would do that. But the truth of the matter, and this is why, like our scenario courses that we do for military and law enforcement, we call them evidence-based scenario training. Because you can look at CCTV and you could look at eyewitness shit from all the phones. Nobody's taking action. They're just filming violence. And you never see anyone looking cool in a fight. Everyone looks messy. Everyone looks like they're a beginner. Yeah. Even if you analyze like trained people, they don't look cool during real violent encounters. So
it reminds me, have you ever, so if you take two, let's say white collar boxers, and you train them for, let's say 3 months for a fight, and you teach them every technique, every combination, every piece of footwork that you know, and they look perfect. They look perfect before they fight. They look perfect in sparring. The bell goes on game day and it turns into a fight.
Right. Oh yeah.
Every time.
and that's a great example of you can't fake experience.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so what we were doing in the 80s with the spear and everything. So the scenario, I've been doing scenarios for 7 years, but what was happening is I was creating in everybody the experience of like the data banks of this is what it looks like when somebody lunges in to grab you. Here's what happens when you throw a sucker punch. We would do like how to intercept a punch where, you know, when you're working at a boxing club, as an example, people have good stances because they're being coached. And so the brain is recording good stances. Yeah. Now you're in the street and I go, what are you talking about, man? And I throw a punch from the table. Your brain only knows what to do when it gets here.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to slip or parry. But if I make you, if I go, what did you say? And I throw the punch from here, your brain just doesn't pick up on the elliptical angle of the trajectory of that shot. It just doesn't go, oh, I know what to do here. Your brain's going, what the fuck was that? That's the Jack in the Box moment. There's an emotional side. And, you know, I can go on and on and on, but this all ties back to that 1980 epiphany, fancy word for my light bulb moment of, oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong. And every one of my students, even to this day, if we're learning how to defend it from a headlock, we're spending more time learning how to read the headlock and intercept the headlock. So we're doing the whole gamut, because I'm never saying, well, you'll never be in a headlock, or you'll never be mounted, or the guy will never throw a good punch. But what we're looking at is what's probable, not what's possible, because everything's possible. But I can look at statistically, I can look at evidence-based, and that's what we would do. We created a protocol that's now taught at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. They teach this protocol, which I brought to them in the early 90s. It was how to reverse engineer training based on studying like dashboard video and CCTV, where instead of you practicing your martial art move, you're going to study the bad guy, and you're going to identify the pre-contact cues and measure and compare and contrast that against your preparation.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Tony, just so people at home know, what does SPEAR stand for?
It's spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response. Spontaneous protection refers to our body's innate startle flinch. So every one of us is wired with a startle flinch. Unless you have some sort of brain injury where you don't respond to like a sudden stimulus, that like a dangerous auditory or visual stimulus. So you could be somewhere and someone goes, "Look out!" You're at a golf course and someone yells, "Look out!" Your hands come up to cover your head, right? You see all those jokes online where people are throwing people at people, or there's one guy, with a baseball glove in a crowd going, "Look out, everybody." And, and there's no ball. He's like in the middle of the street going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And he's doing that. And they see glove ball and they start doing this, right? So our body is born with this startle flinch cross extensor reflex. And I've assigned it and it's so fascinating, this metaphoric airbag concept, that it's the body's organic airbag, that if I throw something at you and you think it's going to hit you, if I picked up, something here and I whip it at you and you think it's coming in, you do this really quick. Everybody does that. So here's an interesting thing. If I have 10 martial artists sitting at a table in front of me, and one guy's Kyokushinkai really hard, this guy's Shotokan, this guy's Tai Chi, this guy's Praying Mantis, this guy's Wing Chun, this guy's, Jeet Kune Do, this guy's a boxer, and they're all sitting there like this, listening to me talk. This is a great visual. They all have this muscle memory that doesn't exist, right? And then all of a sudden, I go like this and I go, "Hey, get your fucking hands." All of them will go, "Whoa." All of them will gun. If I picked up a bowling ball and I fucking whipped it at everybody, right? But it was like a kid's ball that was painted to look like a bowling ball, so they think it's real. What would every single one of these guys do? They would all go, "Fuck." So I love sharing that, because when a stimulus is introduced too quickly, your reactive brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, hijacks your executive function. Executive function is, what would you do if a guy pulled a gun? Well, if I'm standing here, I'll grab the gun here, I'll redirect it here, I'll do this Jackie Chan disarm, and then I'm back in the fight. If I'm Chuck Norris, I got kicking jeans on, I'm going to do a fucking crescent kick. Like, everyone has a theoretical idea of what they do. What I've done with the SPEAR system, which is weaponizing the startle flinch, is studied the relationship between fear, aggression, danger, and sudden movement, and how it makes this happen in the body, right? And this is the fastest thing you could do. If you talk to a buddy who's a cop, a firefighter, EMS, and you ask them in any accident where someone wasn't wearing their seatbelt, where is there always trauma? And they will tell you all the time, hands and forearms. When somebody goes through a windshield, they go through like this. Yeah. And so think about how freaking fast you need to be. Your car hits another car or a tree and you go through a windshield, that before your head hits, your hands get up in the way. So we figured out a way to weaponize the startle flinch. And that was this research starting back in 1987. Doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter your experience. It just happens. Now, somebody who trains in jiu-jitsu, somebody who trains in boxing, somebody who trains in martial art, and they're good at it, they can use the SPEAR system like an airbag deploying as a bridge to the next move in the arsenal that they've earned through their hard practice.
And how long does it take to teach the SPEAR system?
A day.
A day?
Yeah. So let me answer that two ways.
Yeah. I mean, you always get better at it, right? But yeah.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. I can't teach somebody how to box in a day. I can't teach somebody jujitsu in a day. I can't teach somebody taekwondo in a day. But I can teach somebody how to weaponize the startle flinch in a day because they already have the startle flinch wired in them. This is actually very controversial because if you've been training, this is actually a fantastic conversation and what a great question, but it's also very controversial. We all have an unconscious bias. We all of us have, we believe in things and that becomes our narrative. And that's how we get into arguments. So we've never seen it, more amplified than this last year. Yeah. As far as unconscious bias.
For sure.
It really exists in the martial art world too, almost at a religious level as well. Like arguing, you see a violent encounter and someone goes, that's why I do Krav. That's why I do jujitsu. That's why I carry a gun. Right. And so what I'm about to say is very provocative, but remember, I've been doing this for 43 years and my main clients are military law enforcement, right? And other public safety professionals. And I've always taught the general public on the side, but my main business since 1993, 27 years straight, is teaching people who actually really get into violent encounters. And so I've created from there a scientific approach to scenario-based training, an approach to adaptive courage and mindset and understanding the psychology of fear by respecting the physiology of fear, very different. Figured out a way to weaponize the startle flinch through classical conditioning, understanding that if this motion is going to happen, whether you train with me or not, whether you're trained or not, then this becomes the first immediate action that represents a protective opportunity. Right? So it deploys like an airbag. So think about how genius an airbag is in a car. You're texting, you're drunk, you're driving well, and somebody runs into you. The car's computer deploys the airbag. Imagine, and we know that airbags save lives. What would happen tonight if I could turn off every airbag in every car around the world? What would happen to mortality rates tomorrow in car accidents? Skyrocket. But what would also happen if I suddenly disconnected the computer and I told everybody in the next accident, which is going to be a surprise to you, you need to push a button on your dashboard. Don't worry about it. It's right beside the air conditioner button, just to the right there. No, not that button, this button here. Push that button to deploy the airbag and then you'll be fine, maybe. In an accident, could you imagine that? So think about it. This is what happens when I say to you, watch this. Peter, guy grabs you by the shirt, slams you against the wall. What do you want to do? You want to do a body shot, left hook to the body? You want to do an uppercut? You want to do a right hook? What's your move?
Honestly, headbutt.
Headbutt. Okay. So, but did you think about any other shots, or you're going to headbutt right away? And that's because you're from Europe, so you know to headbutt. Americans wouldn't think to headbutt first, right? My UK and Scottish guys know that, but yeah. Would you think about the body shot? But a lot of it also would be.
Yeah, I guess if it was that close, then yeah, I would think about a body shot.
Right. Well, again, if he's like this going, hey, motherfucker, and he pulled you in here, you're going, right? So here's the thing. In the moment, if you were truly surprised, if you bumped into somebody at a bar, you're carrying a drink and you're here, you bump into Bob, boom, and he turns on you and goes, hey, motherfucker, and grabs you. Like my student Mitch in 1980, your first response isn't headbutt, body shot. It's like, whoa, and you flinch. And if you have nothing in your hands, if you have something in your hands, remember, oh fuck, I'm holding my phone tighter and my beer bottle tighter. So this is all physiology. So when people study with me, we've got over 200 affiliates around the world. They're all experienced martial artists. They just realize I've got all these tools. It's almost like you're like someone who's a serious martial artist. They're almost like a carpenter with tons of tools, but nobody's giving them a blueprint for this type of architecture.
Yeah.
I don't understand here.
Sense.
And So it's a fascinating thing, and I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper in this contention that I can teach it in a day. What I'm teaching here is by lining up the fear management elements of indignation. How can we tap into our aggression? Jack in the box stuff. How do we handle the surprise? Suddenly you realize like this is a system that insulates you. Like in the car example, you could be a good driver. It's an asshole who's drunk or texting or speeding somewhere that loses control that causes the accident. The good driver doesn't cause the accident. So if you're a good martial artist or you're untrained, you're minding your own business. You're trying to get through today, trying to bring some, money home for your family to pay your rent and put some food on the table and do this stuff. And then something happens. The first place you're going to get hit is the emotional, psychological aspect of denial, where your brain goes, no fucking way. You'll say whatever you want, but that's a metaphor. You're going, holy shit, here we go, right? Even train people if they're truly surprised. So what we discovered is when a stimulus gets introduced too quickly, the body has this protective response to protect the head, the command center. It'll either cover the head and or push away danger, depending on the proximity. So this is where SPEAR came from. Spontaneous protection is the startle flinch. Accelerated response is I'm not teaching people a complex motor skill. So when I asked you what you would do, what you're doing is you're visualizing in the back of your mind, in your memory bank, headbutt here, maybe a body shot here, but all of that takes time to download. In a sudden violent encounter, and it works in most scenarios if you got experience doing it. But what we've done is we've figured out a way through what I call just a performance enhancement metacognition concept, is that if you grab me and I flinch and my hands come up and they end up, going like Bob grabs me and I go, oh, Bob, shit, you scared me. Instead of me thinking, oh, I like the headbutt. Oh, I like the knee. Oh, I'm going to take the guy down and do this. I look at where did my hands go and what is the closest weapon to the most available target. And then I move from there. So I might, going back here, where I walk by and this guy grabs me and spins me and I go, whoa, if I decide, shit, first thing I'm gonna do is morally and ethically and legally try to diffuse it. But if it looks like it's gonna escalate, I'm gonna then move from here where my hands are up. And this is the beautiful thing about this is when somebody grabs you and you let that startle flinch happen, it's a Trojan horse, because the body language doesn't look like you know anything about fighting. This is the beautiful thing about, again, the optics. The optics these days, whether people are filming it, it's you're morally, ethically, legally trying to diffuse. If push comes to shove, you are in the most advantageous stance possible, because it doesn't look like a stance. We in fact call them nonviolent postures, right? So there, closest weapon, closest target deploys. That would be an index palm or a finger jab or an elbow, whatever it is. But what we're doing and why we can teach people in a day is we're teaching them how to move. So if I take somebody who's done 10,000 push-ups with you and they're here like this, and we do a thing where somebody's grabbed this female by the throat and he's pinned her against the wall and he's threatening her, I'm going to say, I want you to feign fear and feign compliance, like that fight I had when I was 13, right? Yeah. Okay, you're scaring me, I'll do whatever you want. That person's aggression changes, their hold changes, because now they're moving to the next stage. And then I'm going to tell them, I want you to do the hardest rep of a wall ball you could possibly do. I want you to do the most explosive burpee into their face. I want you to take all of that fear and anger and all of your reps doing push-ups, and I want you from here to go bam, right, and blast that person up under the jawline. And I'm giving them shit that a traditional martial artist, a classical traditional martial artist will go, that's a shitty palm strike. That's not technical. But you don't need to be technical in self-defense. You need to be tactical. That's a subtle distinction. Don't be technical, be tactical.
And Tony, I know you talked about, you taught a lot of this stuff to the military and the police force and so forth, but you're doing this for everybody, right? Every civilian, all walks of life, male, female,
yeah,
teenagers, whatever. Anybody can do this stuff.
We have several divisions in my company. One, we've got a law enforcement military training division. We've got another division that educates professional self-defense instructors and martial artists. Because there's a lot of conscientious professionals out there that go, yeah, I don't really do scenarios. I'm really good at jiu-jitsu. I'm really good at boxing. I'm really good at my martial art, but I don't know how to do scenarios properly. And then we have another division that teaches the general public. So citizens of almost any age. Obviously there's a limit to how young you can start and how old you can go. And then we have, of course, we do a lot of stuff online now, which is a byproduct of everything that went on. That was a fun pivot to develop online content.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've all had to do that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
But so we've got the spear thing, which is the 1-day course, and then the Be Your Own Bodyguard thing. Was that an extension of that, or is that something?
Yeah. So spear is actually the umbrella of everything I do.
Right.
So spontaneous protection, enabling accelerated response. It's taught in Be Your Own Bodyguard. It's taught in we've got a 2-hour online course called Essentials of Personal Safety. We teach the elements of that. Look, I've had people read an article in a martial art magazine and then use my system, right? Like, because you read something, you go, holy shit, I never thought about that. And then you're doing it, right? You get your hand out, finger splayed outside 90. This is the strongest place your body can be. It's not out here and it's not in here. Your body would naturally figure it out. So again, why I'll tell people we can do this in a day is because I'm using, if I teach somebody to knee somebody, right? I'm teaching them, if you can put your foot up on a chair and tie your shoe, you've got the range of motion and coordination to knee somebody in the nuts or the stomach or the face, right? So we're using patterns that they've been doing their whole life. In the de-escalation, we're doing that. So Be Your Own Bodyguard is the 1-day course that we do, but what they're taught, everything in it is based on all the spear research from the 80s.
Got it.
So every course is a spear course, but we've named them differently. Like if I'm marketing spear, people are like, what is that, right? Be Your Own Bodyguard. I actually coined that in the late 80s, where I told, when I was doing seminars, I would tell people like, VIPs have bodyguards. And they go, yeah. I go, well, so you're not a VIP? And they go, what? I go, like, who's your bodyguard? They're like, oh, I guess we're our own bodyguard. There's this metaphor of like, who's your bodyguard? Who's going to take care of you? So Be Your Own Bodyguard's been around a long time. That's the 1-day course. And what I did with that one is I thought, like, if you called me up and said, I got a really good friend who's taking off for Europe soon, and they're going backpacking alone, and they know nothing about self-defense, and I trust you, could you teach them? And I go, yeah, like, how many days can I train them? And they go, oh, well, they're leaving in 2 days. So tomorrow. Like, that was literally the challenge. If I had 1 day, and the reason I did it, listen, this is just an opportunity. And because, you understand the fight game, most of the general public and most people don't want to get in a ring like you did and get punched in the face. Most people don't want to spar. Most people don't want to go to a jiu-jitsu school. Most of the world just wants to go through their day, right? Like, do you know anyone that buys a first aid kit and hopes that some accident happens so that they can use it? Do you know anyone that buys a fire extinguisher and goes, so excited I got this fire extinguisher. I hope the house catches on fire tonight so I can use this, right? So most people who need self-defense will never practice martial arts. So the Be Your Own Bodyguard was a solution. And I tell people this, I designed it with the efficiency of a tactical first aid course. You can take a tactical first aid course in 4 to 6 hours, learn how to put on a tourniquet, learn how to stop bleeding, learn how to do mouth to mouth, CPR, and you've got life-saving skills, but you're not a fucking doctor.
Yeah.
But you've got life-saving skills. So I tell people, when you do our Be Your Own Bodyguard course, you can't jump in an octagon. You can't jump in the ring. And I tell them, look, what you have are skills to buy time, to create space, to get to fucking safety, but you're not a martial artist. Yeah. For some reason, when I launched the Be Your Own Bodyguard, I had a lot of martial artists attacking me and calling, you know, I'm just in it for the money and this and that, not ever doing any research, going, dude, I've been doing this one-day course since the 80s. And for most of these guys saying this is bullshit, I tell them, I've been teaching self-defense longer than you've been alive, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's Instagram specialists, you know, they know everything.
Well, but it's a fair question, because listen, if you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu and you're training, you get tapped out every week. And if somebody says to you, and you don't know who I am and what I'm about and the science and the research and the scenario, the trials and tribulations, and that I actually built the system because a student of mine lost the fight. Yeah. And that bothered me more than it bothered him. I took that personally and I sought out to solve the problem. And so, but if you ask that blue belt who doesn't know the history and science about this, and let's say, you know, you go up to this person, you hear about this one-day course and you have zero interest in jiu-jitsu, but I trust you. I go, hey man, I saw this ad for this one-day bodyguard something course. I don't know what it is, but can you learn self-defense in a day? If you ask that to any martial artist, their answer will be, of course not, it's bullshit. If I asked a doctor, and here's my metaphor, if I asked a doctor who spent 10 years studying medicine, 7 years in school, working 2 jobs, hey, can I learn practical medicine and life-saving procedures in a day? Their immediate knee-jerk answer is like, no, like you got to go to, are you kidding? You got to work on a cadaver. You got to do this. You got to do in residency. No, but I asked the question wrong, right? So, you know, you ask an EMS or a firefighter, can I learn some life-saving skills in a day? They're going to go, yeah, every month I teach this here, sign up for this course. Yeah. And they will never make fun of you for doing it, right? So it's an interesting thing when you talk about the Instagram, Facebook experts.
There's a lot of them.
Listen, I made a one-day course that people have used for decades. If they said to me, is this all I need to know about self-defense? I'd say, of course not. But this is enough for you to detect and avoid, to improve your situational awareness. It's enough for you to understand some verbal skills. And if push comes to shove, it's enough for you to use your body's natural movement patterns and instincts. And we've had people use this shit.
Yeah.
You know, so it works. I just wish there was a way better than, like, most martial artists aren't going to listen to this 45-minute explanation of what's the difference between a one-day course and a 2-day course, or a 2-year course, or a 20-year course.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
do you do any like other follow-up courses you can do once you've done the first one? Or
for sure. So I've got over 200 affiliates around the world, you know. So there are people who have Krav Maga schools and MMA schools and boxing schools that teach my system, you know, and because they recognize, you know, we had a couple of guys who are, they run MMA gyms, like they're competitive MMA gyms. They saw me teaching at a seminar, but their personal integrity, they came up to me after, they said, you know, a lot of the people that train with us think that they could use the Thai and the MMA and the boxing for self-defense. And I realized in listening to you that like that's not self-defense. We don't teach people how to fight. We teach people how to think so they don't have to fight. It's the bad guy that's going to force you to fight.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to avoid it and you don't know how to de-escalate it, the bad guy forces it, or your ego or your fear forces it. So in a moral, ethical, legal scenario, what these guys realize is they didn't understand how to teach self-defense from a scenario perspective. So we've got a lot of people that teach it ongoing. So if somebody comes to me for the one-day course and they want more, there are resources out there. And then of course, what we started, and it's way more exciting and fun than I ever imagined. If you had told me a year ago that I would start a garage gym program and be teaching group classes out of my gym on Zoom, I'd have said, that's not happening, Peter.
Yeah.
You know, but I will tell you this, at the height of my school's popularity in the early 90s, I never had more than 80 or 90 people signed up. And most of the time you'd have 20, 30 people in a group class, but it was always 80 or 90 people. And I loved it. I loved teaching classes. I loved being forced to be in shape and being able to be ready to demo and teach. And when I closed my school in 1993, because I started only doing scenarios for scenario-based training for law enforcement, military. And I did that since 1993. I stopped doing group classes. When the lockdown happened, I canceled 15 classes in March. When they extended the lockdown, I had to cancel 15 classes. That represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. And there was a day that I was sitting there, I went, yeah, that's not going to work. And I realized I could lose my whole business, my house, my ability. And a buddy of mine jokingly said to me, he said, aren't you kind of like a famous self-defense guy? And I said, yeah, sort of. He goes, well, why don't you teach like Zoom out of your garage? And I was like, fuck. It hadn't even occurred to me because I haven't taught a group class since 1993. Remember, it's very different. There were years I was on the road where I did 260 days on the road doing seminars, but doing a seminar on the road for 50 people or 100 people or 20 people, you're not creating community. You're not creating a connection. Yeah, you stay in touch with the host and a couple of people, you hit it off, high five, but you're not really, there's no community when you're doing, you know, I'm in Venezuela one day and next week I'm in Texas and then I'm flying to England. Right.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's been the same for us. Like we have members of our community now that we would never have had if you know, it hadn't happened and we hadn't built this online content. And you know, it's something we're going to improve and keep working on, and it's going to allow us to grow our community beyond, you know, what we ever thought was maybe possible. So, you know, like with all these things, finding positive from these negative situations is always like what entrepreneurs do, right? We have to find ways to make it work. So, you know, hopefully it will work in our benefit eventually.
Well,
but
I mean, what you just said there about what you did and how you pivoted and how you created an online community, that goes back to that observation I made in the 80s. The people who manage their fear manage to fight. You know, people that have completely closed their business and given up. They're in a state of depression. But you said, no, I'm going to manage my fear and I'm going to fight. Even if you didn't use the word fear, it was an obstacle. And there are days when you're putting your head down, you're going, oh my God, how am I going to handle this? Or how are we getting through this week or whatever? And then but if you manage your fear, and this is another thing about fear management, you know, like if you look at my shirt, right? No fear. That t-shirt company, I used to have every one of their t-shirts, but it doesn't exist, right? Here's an interesting thought. And I teach it to everybody who goes through a course. You can't be brave if you're not afraid. I'll say that again, listen to it deeply. You can't be brave if you're not afraid. If you're doing stuff and you have zero fear, there's zero courage required, right? If I look at, I got friends that jump out of airplanes that do base jumping. And if some of them, I go, are you afraid? They go, fuck no. You know, they're like adrenaline junkies. I go, well, then that doesn't require any courage. And I've got other friends who are really skilled who I go, are you afraid to jump? They go, fuck yeah. Fuck, I'm so afraid. That's why my preparation is immaculate.
Yeah.
That's why I train. I do that. And they can recognize it. And for some people, it might be semantics, but this is a big thing in a macho community like martial arts, type A's, no fear. I used to have every shirt. And because I would make the joke, no matter how many no fear t-shirts I bought, I was still afraid.
Yeah.
Right? And it was, how do you manage your fear? And so, you know, that was the whole thing with the garage gym was amazing. I've got over 150 people who train with me every week. The garage gym is almost twice as big as my gym was in the 80s. And I've got my community back.
Yeah.
I get on, I log on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there's already 20 people on talking about their haircut and what they did this weekend. And they're all over the world in different time zones. And it blows my mind. And I sit there and I smile, and everyone, it's like Cheers. If you remember the old
TV show. For sure.
right?
Hey, Tony, what kind of training are you doing in your garage gym?
So it's all my self-defense. It's all the principles of SPEAR, Be Your Own Bodyguard. We got people drop 20, 30 pounds. We're not doing jumping jacks. We're not doing, everything is tactical. And so it's true. Like most people could never, like I said earlier, I'm 60 years old right now. If you didn't know me in the 80s, or if you didn't get to a seminar, there's a good chance you're not going to train with me. And if you had interest in doing that, the garage gym is the only way. Especially like I got people in Australia and Spain and Germany logging on at different times. And of course, we record them, so a lot of people can't do it live.
Yeah.
But, like, what are you going to move to Southern California to train with me? Now you have a chance to pick my brain, to learn the system. And some of the drills we're coming up with, it's amazing how I almost and I can't believe I said this last week, and I'll repeat it on your show. There are parts of teaching in Zoom that I like better than when I teach live. Yes, I miss the connection, but I'm so much more focused and so much more committed to the lesson plan that I designed, where when I'm teaching live, I get distracted by body language and movements, where I might stop and I go, everyone stop, Peter, do that again. Everyone look at this. And now the class takes on this new direction and goes this way. With Zoom, if I've got 30 people on there, they're all like this big, right? They're 1 inch big. So we do gallery view back and forth and stuff like that. But for the most part, I planned a lesson, and I'm teaching, we do lessons on mindset, on fear, on situational awareness, on movement patterns, on tactical fitness, the way we do our what I call them combat calisthenics. Everything we do, I go, this move.
Combat calisthenics. I love that.
Yeah. Combat calisthenics. Yeah. Yeah. It's so what's interesting, when I started it, how I started it, when my buddy gave me that idea, I just wrote an email out to my list. I said, hey, how many of you would be interested in training with me, in the garage gym? We had 100 people say, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I went from nothing to, and those 100 people saved my company.
That's great.
And so we've been doing them nonstop. We're on class 135 in a row. Yesterday's class was 135 in a row.
Right.
And I wanted to say one other thing about that. I forgot what it was, but it's almost like the fountain of youth for me, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah.
My classes are supposed to be 45 minutes with Q&A. They're all 2 hours long.
Right.
And I tell people, it's my canvas. I didn't realize until I started doing it that when I was 15 years old, my mom said to me, what are you going to be when you're older? A fireman, police officer? You're going to go into the family business? And I was sitting on the floor, stretching, trying to get the splits, looking at Bruce Lee magazines. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, school is not going to be that important for me. And she's like, why? I said, I'm going to be a famous martial artist like Bruce Lee and develop my own self-defense system. Right. Like that was my dream. Yeah. Right. When I was 15. And so when I opened up and I started teaching in 1980, I was fulfilling a childhood dream. And I did that for 13 years and my career went off here. I didn't realize how that killed a part of me when I stopped teaching regular group classes. And now I have that back. And I literally, if you were on any of my calls, there's at the end, I'm going, any more questions? I go, guys, if you don't ask me questions, I got to go back and do emails and have meetings. Right. And so the 1 hour class is now a 2 hour class.
Amazing.
Craziness.
So we got the 1 day seminar. We got the 2 hour No Fear seminar, which is an online seminar that people can log on to at any how many of them do you do a week? So it's a course you can just buy at any time. Yeah. So a lot of people are really interested not in the self-defense part, but they're interested in more the holistic self-defense. So we created a digital version of my No Fear presentation, right, that you buy it and then you just use it. Listen, what's that? You can just watch that anytime. Yeah. I mean, like literally, it's got nothing to do with physical self-defense. It's all, and listen, I tell people fear throttles everything we do, who you talk to, therefore who you marry, how much weight you lift, whether or not you defend yourself, what you're going to do during the pandemic. Again, you can't solve the problem if you become the problem. And all of that is understanding, creating this self-awareness. So all the courses we have
EOPS, Essential to Personal Safety, is a 2-hour live course we do once a month. We've got Be Your Own Bodyguard, which is kind of like dormant right now because of all the lockdowns, because that's an in-person course. We've got the No Fear course, which is digital, and then the Garage Gym, which is live every week. We run 4 classes a week, and if you can't make the live class, every class is recorded and then uploaded to a vault online, and you could go through any of the classes, and each week is a different theme.
Awesome. So, and these are all on your website, Tony? What is your website?
Yeah. Our main website, if you want, our main website is Blauer Training Systems, and that gets you access to like everything we do, because we do corporate, we do coaching, we do all sorts of stuff. And then our practical tactical website is Blauer Spear, my last name in the word spear, BLAUER, Spear. And I'll send you all those links. You can.
Cool. And we'll put those on the podcast, guys, so you can get the links to those. And it's funny. One of my favorite words you've been using today is de-escalation, because it's amazing to me. Like, to me and you, like, de-escalating situations is like natural to us. But it's amazing how many people now, like online or even in person, like just always want to escalate situations and make things more and more volatile, rather than like just dealing with things in a.
Oh, that's one of the dangers of being behind a computer.
Yeah,
people say and do things they would never say to somebody's face.
Right. Yeah.
It's a weird time. It's a weird time.
Listen, Tony, thank you so much for taking the time, brother. I find all this stuff fascinating. I find you fascinating, and I look forward to learning more from you. We're going to be doing more of this stuff at PHAROS, when we can reopen PHAROS for real next year, and I'm definitely going to like hook everybody up with to learn from you and learn more from you, and I'm going to learn more from you myself. So, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. I just wanted to kind of finish off with are there 3 things, any 3 tips you could give people out there in the realm of self-defense that might help them in a confrontation or a difficult situation?
Sure. I'm going to improvise a little bit, but the first thing is this: is to memorize this line: no awareness, no chance. No awareness, no chance. If you don't know what's happening, there's no chance that any move you learned, whether you got a keychain with pepper spray on it, or some secret move that ninja taught you. The bottom line is, if you have no awareness, you have no chance. So what is the best way to improve your awareness? So a lot of people talk about head on a swivel. I'm not a big fan of head on a swivel, because if you don't have good self-awareness, the fact that you're looking around, you still don't know what you're looking for. So to enhance the safety of everyone, let's be selfish, of just your community, the PHAROS community, is for a couple of days, it's going to sound weird, for a couple of days, I want you to pretend that you are an opportunistic mugger. And you're going to follow yourself in your day and ask yourself, when would I mug me? This is a weird exercise, and it's a little creepy because there's nothing to do other than observe yourself. But let's say, you're at an ATM machine and your phone rings as you're pulling cash out of the ATM. Because you live in a bubble, you're going to go, hey, hold on a sec. Yeah, what? And you have zero situational awareness because you defaulted to the dopamine hit of the ping of your phone.
Yeah.
As opposed, so that's just a silly example. And speaking of that, everyone should watch the 2 videos I've done on ATM safety, right? Because there's so much to learn from there. But, you get to your car in your parking lot, and what people do, the first thing they do, they get in their car, it's at night. They got there quickly looking like this, and then they slam their door, and they sit there for a moment, and maybe they lock the door, they're not, and they go like this. I see so many cars at night with faces lit up because people are looking at their phone, right? And it's one of the number 1 places to get attacked. Off the beaten track gas stations, parking lots and stuff like that.
Dude, it's crazy. If you have that Citizen app, the fucking the carjackings and the stuff that's going on right now in LA is off the chart.
So a lot of it, again, this isn't, and I will caution everybody, if you do this exercise, it will improve your situational awareness, because you realize, where I didn't realize this, but when I come into my apartment, my buzzer, when I buzz myself in, the buzzer here is 30 seconds long. Anyone can open the door after and sneak in. Like just having that awareness where you don't lead someone into your apartment. And again, this is, for some of you listening to this is creeping you out, but this is the moment where you need the greatest amount of awareness. Because remember what I said in the interview, every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling before the attack. So when you combine that with, okay, I'm walking to my car. I'm going to pause here. Do I hear any footsteps? Am I being followed? Okay, I'm going to get in my car now. I'm going to immediately, before I get in my car, I'm going to look in the back. I'm going to lock the doors as soon as I get in. I'm going to get the hell out of my parking spot. I'm not going to check my messages while I'm, in a parking spot where suddenly somebody breaks my window or distracts me and goes, hey, have you seen my dog? I'm lost. And you're like, what, your dog? And they distract you. So number one tip is, if you have no awareness, you have no chance. So I just shared a really great way
that's
to
awesome advice. Yeah.
But remember this, folks, while you're doing this, you may giggle, you may laugh, but you might also feel like a little bit more paranoid. Because if I walked with you during the day and I said, this is a choke point, this is a dangerous spot, watch out here, suddenly you're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want you to change your life. I just want you to be more aware. And it's no different than what you said, Peter. If you were a careless, reckless motorcycle driver, and then I said, listen, man, you got to look out for the other guy. You're on a bike. So you see when that light flashes on over here, that's a guy, he just stepped on his parking brake, maybe shifting into gear. Does he see you? Are you in his blind spot? What is this? And you're going, now for a bit, you're driving really carefully. And then as your brain automates the process, you kind of adapt, and that's that adaptation. So that's one big heavy skill. Yeah. The next thing I need to tell people is this, and I tell people, look, no awareness, no chance. So the first thing in making yourself safer is improve your situational awareness. Okay. The next thing is, if something is about to happen, you will get a fear spike. There's no way out of that. There's no way that you can go, hey, that guy is following me, or that guy's trying to break in my house, or that guy is approaching me. There's no way that your proverbial heart doesn't skip a beat and you get a fear spike, you get adrenaline dump. So the most important thing I could tell you is you need to control your fear and manage fear. It's the psychology of fear, not the physiology or biology of fear.
Right. You have to expect fear. Fear is going to happen, and then it's just about how you deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the reframe there that is big, and I can't get into the whole fear management process right now, is that when you're managing your fear, if you expect this state of no fear, you're in for a rude awakening, right? Remember this. So my next tip is, you can't be brave if you're not afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to turn your fear into fuel.
Yeah.
Your fear is your fuel. That's where you tap into your indignation. And then the last thing is that if somebody grabs you and moves on you, your body will flinch, and it will bypass executive function and cognitive skills. Even if you got a little bit of training, we've got videos of pro fighters, of trained people still flinching.
Yeah.
When you flinch as a PHAROS member, whether you're virtual or actual, you're doing movement patterns that are strengthening a core to extremity movement of a strike. And so if I'm over here fighting somebody who's on me, and I go, get off me, and I fire my palm and I smash that bob, boom, as hard as I can. I'm not doing a technical palm strike. I'm just going, get the fuck off me. I'm exploding with my indignation from the core to extremity movement that is a push-up, that is a bench press, that is a handstand push-up, that is and all of that movement here, like that's going to knock somebody off you. And if they're talking, you're fucking coming with me, and you go slam and you jam both those hands away. What you're doing is you're taking this 100,000, your startle flinch response is 100,000 years old. It's older, core to extremity is older, but about 100,000 years ago is when tribes started fighting each other around the planet. So this is a DNA pattern. It's 100,000 years old in you. How many reps do you have, right? And so if you explode out of that, imagine I grabbed you and I go, what are you going to do now, Peter? And you go, well, I'm actually going to go quarter extremity with my fucking palms into your jawline as hard as I can while I'm talking. What's going to happen to my teeth, my jaw, right? And the last thing, another 4 here is nobody expects the good Samaritan to defend themselves. That's why the predator attacked you.
Right.
No one attacks somebody thinking they're going to lose a fight. That's a huge, huge psychological advantage. So you got to navigate the fear. So there's 4 very serious tips.
Awesome. Amazing. Amazing. God, this whole thing makes me think about Roadhouse.
Right? Right? The remake or the original?
No, the original.
Duh. That was a trick question.
They did a remake?
Yeah. It's good that you don't even know about it.
I don't even know about it. Who's in the remake?
Yeah, I don't even know. I didn't go see it.
Right.
But the original.
The original is the greatest film of all time.
It's so good.
I'm sure you know.
Right on.
All right, brother. Thanks again so much, Tony. I look forward to catching up with you again soon. And
be safe. Take care.
Yeah. Love you, brother.
Take care, man.